we've got to go.
Coming.
What are you wearing?
What? Oh, look, I know we're going to Antarctica, but frankly, I think you're a little overdressed. See, I've been doing a bit of research, reading up on climate change, and apparently everything's getting much warmer, so I thought this would be the thing to wear.
No, I don't mind about that. I mean, you'll be cold, but I just don't like the shirt. I mean, it's just so 90s.
Bit ugly?
Yeah, better go and change. Be quick!
Let's see. Backpack, yes. Water bottle, yes. Got everything. Oh, hi and welcome to Scope. Today I'm heading out into the wilderness to get back to nature, get the smell of fresh air. Even though you can't smell it, obviously, on the other side of the TV there, believe me, it smells fresh. So why are we out here? Well, today it's a very environmental sort of scope. We're actually going to tackle the big issue of climate change, but not in the way that you might expect. It's not about the whys or the what ifs, but the hows, how we're all going to cope. It's about climate adaptations. Check it out. Today on Scope, we move in with the flying foxes. We step back in time with some kangaroos and check in with some farmers to find out what they're doing about climate change. Oh, I nearly forgot. First up, of course, we need to brief ourselves on the topic. You know, get all the basics of climate adaptations. But you know what? I think I'm going to be a little bit busy to do it. So I've asked Renee to help out.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm going to introduce you to the climate, how it changes, and what related adaptations plants and animals, including humans, have to make.
We're all familiar with weather because it's all around us. It's what's happening in the atmosphere at a given time, like raining or snowing.
But how is climate different to weather? Well, regional climates are an expression of what sorts of weather to expect at any time of the year.
There are a lot of different classes of climate, and they are organised into groups like tropical, arid, and polar.
Scientists and meteorologists determine the climate by measuring the weather over months and years.
Climates do change naturally over time. For example, around 18,000 years ago, the Earth was in the midst of its most recent glacial period, sometimes known as an ice age. During this time, a large amount of the planet was covered in ice sheets.
But unfortunately, the way climate systems all over the planet are changing at the moment isn't natural at all. It's caused by human activity, and it's called global warming.
Our atmosphere naturally retains gases like carbon dioxide, methane, and ozone, also called greenhouse gases, in what's known as the greenhouse effect. This is really important because it keeps the Earth's surface warm enough for us to live on.
However, we've been releasing extra greenhouse gas into our atmosphere, which means our planet is warming much too quickly. So what does this mean for life on Earth?
Life forms naturally adapt to the climate they live in. That's why polar bears are white, kangaroos jump with their tails, and frill-neck lizards have their frill.
When something like global warming starts to occur, plants and animals are forced to adapt in ways that they're not prepared for.
Some animals, like pandas, elephants and tigers, are losing their habitat and food sources as the climate becomes warmer.
Others, like fish and marine animals, aren't losing their habitat, but it is changing. Oceans are becoming warmer, rivers more salty, and coral reefs are dying.
Humans too will have to adapt to global warming. Rising sea levels threaten coastal areas, which is particularly important in a country like Australia, where most of the population lives along the coast.
Even though sea levels are rising, freshwater resources aren't. We need to ensure that we have enough clean drinking water through processes like recycling and desalination. We also need to move towards clean, renewable energy sources like wind power and solar. So we only have one Earth. And whatever the future holds for our climate, we'll all need to make some adaptations.
Thanks for that, Renee. Well, now we've got the basics. Maybe we should move on to some flighty mammals, flying foxes to be more specific. Not that they're actually foxes, of course. Now, these guys have got really big eyes, so they've adapted to be able to see at daytime as well as at nighttime. But how will they adapt to a changing climate? Well, I guess we'll see.
Sleeping, scratching and screeching. For grey-headed flying foxes, these things are all part of hanging out at home. But these guys haven't been calling Melbourne home for long. They've only been here for about 30 years and climate change is part of the reason why. G'day, I'm Nick, an ecologist from the University of Melbourne, and I can explain. These bats belong to one of 8 species of flying fox in Australia. They feed mainly on fruit, pollen and nectar, and they find food and navigate it by sight rather than by echolocation. Through the day, they roost in colonies that consist of up to 200,000 individuals, and these camps may be seasonal or present all year round. In the past, flying fox camps were only located in warm temperature tropical parts of the country, places which were wetter and warmer than Melbourne. But as you can see, things have changed, and that's partly because Melbourne's climate has. Temperatures here have been rising for the past 60 years due to a warming trend that's been observed all across Australia, and to the urban heat island effect. An urban heat island is a city that's warmer than its surrounding countryside because its buildings and road surfaces retain heat. And the city-country temperature difference in Melbourne can be more than 7 degrees Celsius. Now, as well as getting warmer, the city of Melbourne has been getting wetter, and that's got a lot to do with the watering of our parks and gardens. You see, rainfall in Melbourne hasn't been increasing, but the irrigation of parks and gardens has. And the extra water is so significant that the city's green spaces now have yearly precipitation to match those of flying fox camps in New South Wales or Queensland. But it's not only changes to Melbourne's climate that have made this city flying fox friendly, food is an important factor too. In the past, the grey-headed flying foxes in this area ate foods from 13 tree species that are native to this region. But as Melbourne has grown, more and more trees from other places have been introduced, and many of these are also great sources of flying fox food. This means there's now a bountiful supply of food here, and that's helped this colony thrive. So establishing a successful colony in Melbourne is one way the grey-headed flying fox has adapted to changes in the climate and in the availability of food. And by the looks of it, they're pretty happy in their new home.
Welcome back to an ever-changing episode of Scope, where today we're looking at how plants and animals will adapt to climate change. And even today, the climate's been changing a little bit. It was raining before, and we might even see the sun. But you know, for us humans, it's not so bad. We can go inside if it gets a little bit hot and get in the air conditioning. What if you're stuck out in it? Well, like the plants, how are they going to cope?
Sub-zero winter temperatures and howling blizzards may not be the conditions you like best. But many animals and plants, including these ones, especially adapted to very cold climates, and they'll be at great risk from climate change. How? That's what we're working to find out. I'm Pip from the University of Melbourne, and I'm going to tell you about our research on Australian alpine plants. These grasses and sedges live in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania at altitudes where it's too cold for trees to grow. Wintertime in these parts brings temperatures as cold as minus 20 degrees Celsius, and the plants here spend about 4 months every year under snow. But if our alpine areas become warmer and drier, that will impact the plants living there. So to learn how these species will be affected, we're going to take a close look at their genes. We start with leaves from the plants, which we grind up and make into a solution. Then we extract the plant's DNA from the other parts of its cells and isolate it using a number of laboratory techniques. And after separating the different sized genes using gel electrophoresis, we take a good look at our results. We're interested in finding out whether the plants we're studying have very similar DNA or whether they're genetically different. If the plants are the same genetically, then their species isn't likely to cope with changing environmental conditions very well because it's just not genetically equipped to. But if the plants are genetically diverse, then some of them are likely to be able to deal with living in warmer temperatures. So what have we found out? Well, it seems that these grasses and sedges are quite genetically diverse, so they should be able to cope with some level of climate change. But there are lots of Aussie alpine plants yet to be investigated, and we expect some of them to have low genetic diversity. In other tests we're doing, we look at how drought resistant our study species are by limiting their water supply and seeing how quickly they wilt. And we've been busy conducting trials in the field in the Australian Alps. We use plastic chambers to raise the temperature around alpine plant communities by 2 degrees, and we examine how the plants respond. We found that some species adjust the timing of their flowering to suit the higher temperature, while others don't because they can't. Again, those plants that can adapt to new conditions will be the ones that ultimately win out. So as you can see, it's hard to tell how alpine plants will fare under a changing climate, but everything we can find out about these hardy plants helps.
So far we've looked at how climate change affects everything, well, above the surface, but it actually affects the oceans as well and all the animals that live there. But how does climate change affect the oceans? Well, it's a little bit confusing.
I can show you, Dr. Rob.
Julia? Okay. Wherever you are. Weird.
Take this soft drink bottle, for example. It's got lots of tiny carbon dioxide bubbles dissolved in it, and it's actually a good representation of the ocean because the ocean has absorbed a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Now that's quite handy because the less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the better. But with climate change warming up the oceans, this is causing some problems. So let's investigate this by warming up our ocean. For this experiment, place one bottle of soft drink in the fridge and the other in the sun to warm up. After a few hours, head outside, shake them up, and then open the lid. Now, you've probably tried this a couple of times before, but have you ever compared opening a warm bottle to a cold one? Well, let's find out. Soft drink exploded at the top of the warm bottle, but not the cold bottle. Why? Well, the reason why soft drink sprays out the top is that carbon dioxide is escaping. So, more carbon dioxide escaped from the warmer bottle than the colder one. Whew. So, in terms of the ocean, that means that as the ocean warms up, it can't hold as much carbon dioxide, and so it's released back into the atmosphere, which isn't good news for us. Okay, well, let's head back inside, clean up, and try something else. This time, we're going to look at the effects of carbon dioxide in the ocean. Now, the first thing you need is some chalk. This stuff contains a lot of calcium, which is used by corals as well as a lot of mollusks to make their shells. You'll also need some vinegar. Now, this stuff is quite acidic, and when carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, the seawater also becomes quite acidic. So this stuff represents the ocean. Break up the bits of chalk and place them into a cup. Then pour a little bit of vinegar over the top. You'll notice the chalk and vinegar are reacting and the chalk is dissolving. Now, vinegar is much more acidic than the ocean, so this isn't happening as we speak. But if the levels of carbon dioxide continue to rise, so will the acidity, and this could become a reality. Those poor mollusks.
Hello there, Ted Petrie with another Scope in a Flash. It is great to be with me. Well, it's easy to spot interesting animal adaptations on the surface of the Earth, but what about deep in the ocean? Scientists at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute have been casting their clever eyes below the surface, and they found a see-through fish. Yes, viewers, this is the Macropina microstoma, or barrel eye fish, and it lives up to 800 metres down where the water is so dark it is almost inky. So this little fishy found a way to see in the dark by developing a transparent fluid-filled head and ultra-sensitive tubular eyes, which make use of any tiny bit of available light. The scientists used high-tech remotely operated submarines to study the barrel eye. And they discovered the fish's eyes can focus in on any food source overhead, rotate to follow it, and then zero in on their